Welcome back to redesigning desktop icons. A lot of you really like these for some reason, so I'll keep making them as long as you guys keep asking for them. The icons in this video are probably my favorite I've created so far, so be sure to stick around. First, I had to decide which icon to recreate. Thankfully, I had a bunch of ideas from you guys, as well as some ideas of my own. I ended up settling on Firefox for the first one, not because there's anything wrong with the current logo, but because I just kind of prefer this whole generation of logos. This one's alright, but I think it takes the whole flat design concept a little too far. And this one is, it's not a fox, that's a circle. So I got to work placing some reference images in the scene. Blender makes this really easy, all you gotta do is just drag and drop. Then for the sphere in the center, I used a cube, subdivided it a bunch, and then added a cast modifier to turn it into a sphere. I had absolutely no idea how I would create that fox, but then I had this awful idea that also worked perfectly at the same time. I ended up just following a reference image with a subdivided cube, kind of just tracing out the proportions of the fox as I went along. I did not expect this to work out at all, but somehow it totally did. I ended up with this shape right here, which makes me irrationally uncomfortable for some reason. I ended up doing the same thing for the arm. All I did was take a subdivided cube and then trace it to the image. I really needed the face to be just right, so I dragged in some more images of foxes from different angles and art styles. So then I added some loop cuts in the facial area just to really solidify the shape of the face. With those things out of the way, the basic shape was really starting to take form. However, we didn't have ears, and that's a problem. I thought, hey, one crazy idea worked, so why don't I try freehanding a plane and then solidifying it and manually subdividing it. Now clearly that wouldn't be a permanent fix, but it did the job for now. I mirrored it to the other side, kind of hoping that it would just work, but I ended up changing it later. Next, of course, is the part where we sculpt out the tail. This turned out way better than I expected, and I was finally starting to feel confident that this was going to be the move. Now clearly I had really fluffy looking geometry here, so I decided that I was going to go for like the adorable Firefox type of vibe, so I positioned its head and arm to look like he's just giving the earth a big hug. To be honest, it's something the world could use right now. Alright, I said it. The only thing that still looked off was those ears, so I decided to use a different reference image. I just combined this one and this one, and I came up with this. It's a really simple shape, but I think it does the ears a lot more justice than the other shape did. The simplicity just kind of matches the rest of the model really well, and especially through a camera, I think this worked perfectly. So next it was time to texture these objects. For the sphere in the background, all I had to do was use a gradient texture connected to a color ramp, with which I sampled the colors of the original logo, plugged into a mapping node, plugged into a texture coordinate node, so that I could rotate and scale the texture. I messed around with the roughness and glossy settings, but I ended up just putting glass around it later. Next up, I needed to texture the fox itself. At first I tried using a procedural, fiery looking texture, but this did not work at all. So then I said, ooh, what if this looked like a hand-painted style? So then I got out the graphics tablet and all that, and started just painting individual strokes of like red and purple onto a yellow base color. The only exception was the nose, which I actually just painted a dark brown. But I thought the style looks pretty cool, and I was happy with how that part turned out. The hard part was getting it on the arms and ears. For the ears and arms, I had a couple failed attempts at replicating that texture, so I ended up just using the texture UVs to map it onto the other texture. After this, I was happy with the textures and how they were laid out, but then it was time for shading. And this is where it kind of all fell apart for a little while. Since it's like a firefox, I thought it would be kind of cool if it was glowing. Rookie mistake, fellas. Needless to say, none of that worked. So instead I just removed the emissive material altogether and gave it a matte look as if it was made out of wood or something like that. I shrunk the sphere down and then made another glass sphere around that, added an area light, and now there's this really cool reflection off of the entire thing. I rendered it out on high contrast because with the desktop icon it's really hard to see the details. They shrink them down real small, especially with the 3D ones. It's really hard to tell what's going on. So here's the final logo. This is probably my favorite that I've made so far. It's absolutely adorable, and if you actually preview it on the desktop icon itself, it definitely works. This thing is awesome. So next I had to decide which logo I was going to redesign next. So naturally, I went and looked through some of your guys' submissions. Adobe, Autodesk, yeah, that makes sense. Daniel Krafft, no, stop. The Blender logo, now there's an idea. Stop, we're not doing this. Twitch, that's a great idea. I wonder why this doesn't have more likes. Design a 3D model for the homework folder. Over 3,200 people liked this comment. I love my viewers, but I do not look forward to knowing what these 51 replies are gonna be. And so it was decided. I was gonna do Twitch. The Twitch logo itself isn't that bad, but I just thought I could use some more color. I started by outlining the Twitch logo with geometry, and then I converted that mesh into this neon sign type of thing using a skin modifier. I duplicated it again and made a glass layer. Then I duplicated it all again, scaled it up, and that was a glossy black layer. For the background, I did this sort of curved 3D version of the typical rounded square that apps like to use as a background, and then I created a little interior plane that I could color white. For lighting, I did some blue rim lighting on the bottom edges using 2 area lights, and then one sort of pinkish big glow from the top 45-degree angle. I decided to give the neon sign a little bit of variation, so I colored it using a gradient texture. I rendered it out, and I made sure to check the box that says denoising data in the view layers so that in compositing, I can plug it all in and get a really nice looking clean image. I exported several different resolutions using Photoshop, converted it into a .ico file using an online web converter, and finally I had my icon file. Here is a before and after of the Twitch icon, and here are both of the logos together on the screen. Now obviously it's all subjective, but I gotta say these are some of my favorite. If you have suggestions, feel free to comment them down below, or join the Discord server and make your suggestions there. With all that out of the way, I hope you've been having an excellent week. Sorry if this video is haphazard, I literally have to leave in like 5 minutes, but I'll see you guys next week. Take it easy.